Salutations, gentle listener. I am Professor Aurelian, and it is my pleasure to deliver this evening's lecture, the Esoteric Lexicon, a slow examination of obscure terminology. Let us begin. Today, we embark on a journey into the world of ancient mystical texts, steps into the past that reveal hidden words and phrases that many of us rarely engage with in our daily lives. Our focus will be the unusual language found in these archaic writings. We will define many of these terms and also trace their evolution, exploring how the words and phrases have taken shape over many centuries. Our reading will develop ideas gradually. We will not merely define words. We intend to contribute to a slow and thoughtful development of ideas that have evolved with time, both drawing on scholarly debates and absorbing the quieter cultural shifts of history. Let us begin with Part 1, the nature of esoteric language. At first glance, the language of ancient mystical texts might seem detached from modern everyday vocabulary. Often these texts use words that are not commonly recognized in our contemporary lexicon, a distinct vocabulary that carries with it an air of mystery. One of the first things to notice in these texts is how language is constructed. Many of these words are not just meant to convey straightforward meaning, but they aim to capture a deeper, sometimes ineffable reality that the ancients felt was connected to both the divine and the natural world. When discussing the esoteric lexicon, we must understand that these words are part of a very specialized register. They are commonly found in texts that explore the cosmic, the spiritual, and sometimes even the transcendental. To the casual reader, their meaning may be shrouded in a kind of poetic obscurity. As we break down these words one by one, we aim to remove some of this obscurity by providing context and background that has been accrued through centuries of study and contemplation. One such example is the word numinous. While this term might have found its way into general academic circles and even some philosophical debates, its origins and rich history in mystical texts is worth exploring. Traditionally, the numinous is described as a kind of transcendent presence or an awe-inspiring sense of the divine that one might experience during meditation or in the face of majestic natural beauty. In this regard, the numinous is not merely a descriptive word. It carries with it an almost sacred quality, one that hints at the possibility of a reality beyond daily understanding. Consider, too, terms such as emanation, revelation, and terms that suggest hidden knowledge or a cosmic order. Each of these terms plays its own role in the tapestry of mystical literature. In the case of revelation, the focus is often on the sudden and dramatic unveiling of hidden truths that have been obscured by the passage of time or by intentional secrecy. The word emanation implies a steady process, one that unfolds gradually over time, offering the sense that these mysteries are an inherent part of nature itself. In our subsequent analysis, we will extend this examination by listing other terms that may seem unusual, yet are integral to understanding the complexities of ancient mystical thought. Now we will move our discussion to Part 2, historical and cultural context. As we continue our examination, it is essential to consider the historical and cultural contexts in which these mysterious words evolved. Every ancient civilization that engaged in mystical thought had its own view of the cosmos and a specific manner of relating to the unknown. Take, for instance, some of the mystical texts from the early periods of Greek philosophy. Here the language of the mystical and the divine merged seamlessly with everyday debates on nature, existence, and the meaning of life. In these texts, terms that we now consider as archaic were in fact essential to conveying their philosophical understanding of the world. Over time, however, these words acquired layers of meaning meant to communicate the ineffable, much as we see later in medieval mystical writings. In medieval Europe, scholars and poets often borrowed from these earlier texts, infusing their own ideas into the language. In this evolving process, the words began to display nuance that reflected both immediate cultural needs and the broader ambitions of spiritual exploration. It will be useful to mention that the slow evolution of these words is also reflective of the slow evolution of thought itself in these eras. With the advent of more systematic philosophical and theological studies, there appeared a need to differentiate between the literal meaning of a word and its symbolic or intuitive significance. As scholars debated such topics, they slowly refined their own vocabulary, adopting new adjectives and modifying the existing ones to better capture the mysteries that they still sought in earnest contemplation of the divine and the mysterious. Even within a single mystical text, one might find that certain words have traveled a long way from their initial use. For example, a term used in an early manuscript might have been transformed in meaning by a subsequent scholar who reinterpreted that text. This slow evolution was not a mere accident. It was, instead, the consequence of a living tradition, a train of thought that has traveled through centuries, absorbing influences from various cultural shifts, scholarly debates, and the quiet, almost imperceptible changes in the human spirit. Logically, it now makes sense to amble on to Part 3, detailed definitions and breakdown of terms. Let us now proceed to break down some of these terms in a very systematic manner. It is useful to consider them one at a time, explaining the meaning and giving some background about how each came to be part of the mysterious language of ancient texts. Imagine, for our purposes, a word like eldritch. In modern times, this word may be casually reintroduced within certain literary genres, but its original meaning, rooted in ancient mysticism, stands for something profoundly uncanny and strange. Eldritch suggests a feeling of otherworldly, sometimes eerie beauty. It conjures images of distant realms or of ancient forces that are not of this earthly order. Slowly reading this word aloud, it is as though one is reminded of those energies hidden within the confines of forgotten temples or behind the veils of the cosmos. The full experience of such a word is achieved gradually, with the slow revelation of its background and of what it insinuates. Another term worthy of deliberate slow exploration is Sophia. This word does not simply mean wisdom, as one might initially think in modern parlance. In the ancient mystical texts, Sophia carried connotations of a divine wisdom, often personified. It represents the idea that wisdom is not merely an accumulation of knowledge, but a presence, a force of life, and sometimes even a guide to attaining higher knowledge. Throughout centuries, as texts moved from oral traditions into written forms, the word Sophia absorbed both the significance of its theological implications and the cultural weight that came with the recognition of wisdom as a living quality. Let us now turn to terms that, though readily employed in ancient mystical writings, still challenge the modern interpreter. Take the example of chthonios. Even when pronounced slowly, careful consideration reveals that this term encapsulates the sense of underworld or of the deep, hidden parts of existence. The ancient scholars who used such words were less concerned with everyday uses and more interested in capturing the inevitable aspects of mortality, cycles of nature, and the hidden forces that shape human destiny. Slowly and deliberately articulating a term like chthonios can evoke the appropriate mental imagery, a slow unfolding of the darker layers of life and nature. Another intriguing word is anima, used in a way that suggests more than just a simple soul. In these texts, anima is interconnected with the very breath of life that animates both man and nature. Over time, the meaning of anima extended outward to encompass ideas ranging from natural spirit to an embodiment of hidden energy. By breaking down the word and slowly exploring its usage, we can appreciate how the ancients sought a deep connection between the word's literal sound and the vast, sometimes mysterious concept of life itself. Often one encounters compound phrases in mystical texts that combine a practical idea with an esoteric twist. A phrase like the luminous void slowly unfolds its meaning as one reads aloud its individual components. The word luminous, in this context, suggests that there is light within or surrounding that void, a contrast that points to a deeper duality in nature. The void may remember us of emptiness or the absence of form, yet when paired with the luminous quality, the phrase offers a tension between absence and presence. Such phrases are not constructed quickly, nor are they meant to be consumed in a flash. They require a deliberate, measured pace to fully appreciate the slow development of interconnected ideas. As we systematically list these and other terms, we find that it becomes evident that no word in the esoteric lexicon is without its layered meaning. These words invite us to examine not only the literal signification, but also the symbolic interplay between the word as an audible creation and as a marker of culture and belief. There is a beauty in their complexity. Each term acts as a bridge from the mundane to the sacred, the known to the unknown. Subsequently, we arrive at part 4, the slow development of ideas. In our discussion so far, we have touched upon how words evolve and why they beg a slow, careful treatment. It is helpful now to reflect on why a slow examination matters in a broader sense. When scholars and mystics of earlier times engaged with these texts, they were not in a hurry. They sat with these words, meditating on them, and allowing each syllable to reveal a new perspective. The slow, careful recitation of these terms was a form of practice in itself, a way of inviting not only the mind, but the entire spirit of the speaker to enter a space of contemplation. Consider, for instance, a congregation of listeners in ancient times who would have gathered to hear a learned scholar expound on the deep mysteries of creation and of the divine. Each word was pronounced deliberately, and each phrase was meant to be absorbed slowly. There was an emphasis on the cadence and the rhythm, with the pace of speech designed to guide the audience from one level of understanding to another. The very act of speaking the words aloud was infused with meditative power, and this practice served to cultivate an environment in which ideas were not rushed, but developed in a measured, thoughtful progression. Today, as we introduce these same words and concepts to modern audiences, it is important that we recapture that spirit of unhurried contemplation. Our reading aloud of names like numinous Eldritch, Sophia, and Gathonios, is not an exercise in rote recitation. It is, rather, an invitation to slow down, to consider each word and its accumulated meaning with patient attention. With every slowly pronounced word, we cross the threshold between ordinary language and a more symbolic, expressive speech that bears the weight of history and the depth of ancient thought. This method of slowly developing ideas is also instrumental in bridging the gap between scholarly debate and everyday experience. Many modern scholars dissect these words in tightly measured academic prose, yet in doing so, they sometimes risk losing the inherent beauty of slow spoken word. The spoken language of ancient mysticism is much more than analysis. It is the artistry of language. The gradual blossoming of an idea in an esoteric lecture requires the speaker to pause, to reflect, and to allow each nuance to permeate the listener's consciousness. In due course, we transition to Part 5, a guided reading through the lexicon. To give structure to our exploration, we now proceed with a guided reading. Imagine sitting in a dimly lit hall, where the echoes of chanting and softly spoken mandates fill the room. In that gentle reverberation, each word takes on new life. We begin with the notion of mystikos, a term that in some ancient texts denotes hidden or secret knowledge. Slowly pronouncing this word, one becomes aware not only of its meaning in a literal sense, but also of the fact that there is an invitation to search for what lies beneath the surface of daily life. The term mystikos, in essence, is a reminder that the search for knowledge is a journey that is as much spiritual as it is intellectual. As we glide from mystikos to apocryphal, we note that this term, although now often used in a disparaging way to denote texts of dubious authenticity, originally held a more neutral position. In ancient mystical literature, the idea behind apocryphal was that certain writings were reserved for a select few, a body of knowledge not intended for the common reader. In this framework, the very act of distinguishing between sacred and non-sacred, between revealed and latent, is a gradual process. It is an evolution of thought that relies on careful, deliberate speech. Another term deserving our measured attention is hermetic. Not only is this word associated with ideas of sealed container or closed system in a literal sense, but it also carries connotations of secret, mystical wisdom. Originating in descriptions of the ancient teachings ascribed to the legendary figure Hermes Trismegistus, the word hermetic today encourages us to consider the notion of sealed mystery and the delicate balance that exists between revelation and concealment. To speak the word slowly, one accentuates its layered history, from its link to a venerable tradition of learning to its place in the slow unfolding of esoteric culture. In the same mindful manner, we encounter a phrase such as the threshold of knowing. This phrase is not meant to indicate a definitive boundary, but rather an invitation to the listener. The threshold suggests a point where one may step from the known into the realm of mystery. Slowly spoken, it serves as a metaphor for the journey that one embarks on when engaging with profound mystical thought. With each utterance of the phrase, the listener is reminded of the limits of ordinary perception and the possibility to see beyond, into a realm where words themselves begin to carry the subtle hue of the ineffable. Let us also consider the elegant term ether. While modern science may have relegated this word to the domain of outdated theories about the cosmos, Its ancient usage was one of deep metaphorical richness. In the mystical texts, ether was not simply a substance or a mere hypothesis about the nature of space. It was the very medium through which life, spirit, and the divine were believed to interact. Slowly describing ether gives one the opportunity to dwell on the idea that the physical and the spiritual are intertwined in ways that provoke both curiosity and a sense of sacred wonder. Moving further, we encounter words that refer to aspects of nature as living symbols. Consider the term gaios. Often related to the earth as a nurturing body, gaios was more than a name. It was a representation of nature's vitality and mystery. When pronounced with care, gaios carries the weight of the earth's ancient memory, a reminder that every stone, every leaf, and every whisper of the wind is imbued with the living history of times long past. Accordingly, we approach Part 6, Slow Cultural Shifts and Scholarly Debate. What of the cultural shifts that have accompanied the evolution of this esoteric language? It is necessary to look at the quiet progression of ideas as societies changed. In many ways, the slow evolution of these words is emblematic of a broader transformation in human thought. In the early days of mystical thought, language itself was conceived as a bridge to higher realms. As time moved on, aspects of this language were contested, reinterpreted, and sometimes even revived in new forms. Scholars would gather in great halls and conduct debates on the proper meaning of a given term. They would listen carefully to one another, sometimes spending hours, indeed sometimes entire evenings, exploring the subtle differences that one syllable might imprint upon a word. The key to these debates was not simply intellectual arrogance, but more deeply, a sincere desire to understand the larger cosmological framework within which these words existed. These discourses contributed both to scholarly texts and to the everyday language of those who sought to express their own quiet spiritual quests. Each minute detail in their discussions was meant to invite the listener into a prolonged state of inquiry. Take, for example, the subtle adjustments that were made to a word such as divine. Over centuries, divine has come to be understood in multiple ways, sometimes as a personal quality of deities, and sometimes as a broader category that includes all that is transcendent. As scholars argued over its use, the term slowly absorbed nuances that allowed it to function in a variety of contexts. The discussions were not rushed. Each contribution, no matter how small, was part of a gradual evolution where the meaning of divine became more layered, more intricate, and ultimately more profound. In such settings, even the transition between two thoughts was a moment filled with meaning. The process of slow, systematic speech allowed ideas to be built upon carefully, layer by layer, until a consensus, or at least a shared understanding, was reached. It is in this environment of careful, slow articulation that the hidden dimensions of words develop fully. The process has its own inherent beauty, an intellectual ritual that respects both the subtlety and the power of language. It is in this slow, measured pace that one may hope to capture the full resonance of ancient terms, alongside their deep cultural and spiritual significance. As we bring our lecture to a close, it is important to reflect on the journey we have undertaken together. We began by introducing the esoteric lexicon as the specialized language of ancient mystical texts. We then examined how these unusual words and phrases are not mere ornaments of speech, but are carrying within themselves a long history of cultural evolution and complex scholarly debate. We looked at terms like numinous, eldritch, Sophia, and chthonios, each with their own intricate roots and experiences. We have also appreciated the significance of slow, mindful speech in media, such as text-to-speech, where every word is given the space it deserves for full clarity and thought. The evolution of these words is a testament to the gradual and careful development of understanding in both scholarly and cultural discussions across centuries. This evolution reminds us that language is not static. It is alive and constantly negotiating the balance between the practical and the mystical. The same care and patience that ancient mystics showed in pronouncing their sacred words can serve as an inspiration for us today. It suggests that meaningful dialogue and deep thought are cultivated not by haste, but by reflection, by a slow and methodical unfolding of idea after idea. In our modern age, where information often races ahead at breakneck speed, there is much to be learned from the esoteric lexicon and its measured approach. The very pace at which these ancient words are meant to be read and comprehended stands as an enduring lesson in mindfulness. Each term, when examined with patience, has the potential to reveal layers of meaning, layers that might otherwise be swept away by the hurried pace of everyday life. Finally, let this lecture serve as an invitation. Whether you are a student of history, philosophy, or simply someone who cherishes the beauty of language, take to heart the notion that slow examination allows for deep recognition. There lies within every carefully pronounced word a reservoir of wisdom, a subtle echo of ancient thought, and a reminder of the gradual yet inexorable progression of human understanding. Thank you for staying with this deliberate and thoughtful exploration. May the slow revelations of the esoteric lexicon inspire you to look beyond the surface of everyday language and discover within each word the depth of tradition, the evolution of cultures, and the enduring power of a patient and careful inquiry. This completes our slow, thorough examination of obscure terminology from ancient mystical texts. Every word has been chosen and explained with care, ensuring that as the lecture is read aloud, each idea develops gradually and meaningfully, leaving space for reflection and gradual understanding. Enjoy this journey through language, history, and the very heart of mystical tradition.